Hello and welcome back to Hold On I'm Talking Brother. My name is Joe Greenwood and you are listening to our preview of UFC Fight Night Kansas City, which is headlined by Max Holloway versus Arnold Allen in the featherweight division. Tom, this fight means a hell of a lot, and I feel like not that many people are that bothered.
No, whenever you're headlining an event in Kansas, somebody's forgotten about you. Max blessed. You don't deserve this, brother. Yeah. And this is your chance to rewrite the narrative once again. And Arnold Allen, Joe, the man has a huge unbeaten streak. How are they going to do him like this? How are you going to put him in Kansas on this card?
I know, it's a bit weird one, isn't it? It's like they've never run Hawaii. Like, why not just run Hawaii? Like this, it's just tailor-made, isn't it, for this sort of event? Or somewhere else in England. You know, it doesn't have to be London. You could run somewhere in like Manchester, for example. Can you imagine an English crowd for this fight? Oh my days. Oh my days. But regardless, congratulations, Kansas City. You have got a stonking fight night event. I think this is actually almost like a perfect fight night event of like really good main event and then nice dabbling, nice trickling, a drizzling of, lighter weight fights. Your featherweights and your bantamweights and your flyweights.
Joe, there are some poor, downtrodden Canadians out there who just got their main event for the PPV.
We'll get to that later, yes. I know.
Joe, Nunes on the main card. Not just that, but headlining. And here we got Max Bless versus Arnold Allen in Kansas.
Good for them.
You know, they would be crying out for this in Canada.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Now, listeners, we are going to go straight to this main event. Arnold Allen, streaking featherweight contender. I have long declared him future featherweight champion. Some might say that's a national bias, and to which I say to them, I don't care. I believe Arnold Allen is the business. The problem is he's facing one of the greatest featherweights of all time in Max Holloway. However, a potentially diminished Max Holloway. Tom Ballum, what do you make to that potential tag of Mr. Holloway?
Well, before I issue my riposte, Joe, can I just clarify, is that your position?
I will not reveal that position just yet, Tom.
Well, I would love to hear it, Joe, because that would get my loins burning, my fire very much lit. Joe, you only have to go back a couple of years after Holloway lost to a certain Alexander Volkanovski for the second time.
Yes.
The second time. Not quite conclusive, but with a loss in his next fight, the Blessed Express would have been ground to a halt. He faced a young man called Calvin Kattar, a great boxer. A man with fantastic hands, good volume, fighting out of a solid, stiff jab. One of those jabs that rocks your head back. Rock 'em, sock 'em, non-stop. Kattar was looking fantastic, Joe. So, the stage is set. Max Holloway enters the fight. People have forgotten. What went on to happen, Joe? In that fight, Max Holloway averaged a shot, and I'm saying a strike, every 2 seconds over 25 minutes to put on one of the all-time beatings in the octagon.
That's actually a really good point. I will then counter that by saying the following fight he fought Yair Rodriguez, in which Max took quite a lot of damage to a decision victory in which he had to wrestle to. And then the fight after that, let's be honest, Alexander Volkanovski in their trilogy fight mashed him. Like, he got mashed in that fight. Straight up, not even close, all 5 rounds, utterly dominant. I'm the man, you're not. And we'll get to Arnold Allen in a second, but let's talk about the narrative of Max. 31 years old. He's been in the UFC since he's about 19, 20 years old. Like, crazy Raul Rosas Jr. numbers, you know, in terms of, like, starting. And I don't... He's only ever been in wars. Like, even in fights he's dominated, it's like, my chin is my sort of, like, thing that's going to break you. You know, along with the striking, obviously. I'm not going to do him dirty like that. You know, he is a fantastic, well-rounded striker, but it's like, you can hit me, but I'm not going to go anywhere. And guys can get sort of like punched out that way, and then also with Max firing back there, that'll cut off your breathing, that'll upset your rhythm. Max is really good at that. But, at a certain point, how much more can your chin take?
Joe, you're giving me certain vibes here.
What's the vibe?
What comes to mind? Well, the vibe that you're giving me, Joe, you mentioned in our preview of Justin Gaethje versus Rafael Fiziev that there comes a time in every fighter's life where enough is enough.
Yeah.
And it all comes crashing down. Now, we witnessed that happen to Tony Ferguson in brutal fashion. One of those early fights in the COVID pandemic. He fought Justin Gaethje, and it's, wow, it was devastating for a former great. That led you, Joe, just a few short years later, to predict that Justin Gaethje would meet a similar fate against the young, onrushing Rafael Fiziev. You set it up perfectly for your man Gaethje to go out there and put a whooping on Rafael Fiziev. And I feel like you're going to do it again here. Are you predicting a Holloway drop-off to that extent?
No.
Just off the back of losing to Alexander Volkanovski?
No.
Who we know is the top, the creme de la creme, the top of the sport. Pound for pound, number one in most people's books.
Yeah, in my book as well. Like, I think Volkanovski is the pound for pound best fighter in the world. I don't think we're going to see that level of drop-off on Max. That is... It's a fair narrative, I've got to say, but I don't see it yet. I think the thing that really appeals to me about Arnold Allen for this matchup here is that there's a few tools that I think line up quite nicely for Arnold Allen.
Well, just before we do get into the actual technical breakdown, perhaps we should give a little overview of Arnold Allen's career. Now, Joe, prior to his win over Dan Hooker in London, I believe it was.
Yeah, last year.
Can you give me a rundown, like top 5 moments for Arnold Allen? He's had a long career, 10 fights in the UFC, undefeated. Can you just give me some of the highlights, some of the things that people will remember, just to get people kind of...
Wait, hold on. Are we talking about like a casual fan here, or are we talking about fans who follow the sport deeply, like our listeners do?
Yeah. I mean, let's start off with the ones for the the casual fan, as you put it. The majority. The majority.
Sadiq.
Just give us the highlights. What are the big memories? I want them to
right, but hold on.
wash over.
Hold on. Yeah, but you're not going to have that though of a guy who's fought on undercards of fight nights and has slowly gone about his work in the UFC. Like, it's not a fair setup there. Like, that's not a fair setup of Arnold Allen, and I think that he has over time just accrued a really nice run. And he has had moments, he has had issues in the past, like he had the Mads Burnell fight where he had got the front, he got like a guillotine choke in like the third round in a fight that he was losing. He has done that a few times where he's had to like pull something off. The Alan O'Meara fight, I think, was another one where, again, he had to like pull off something quite scrappy and scrambly to get the win. But it shows that late into fights, he can get those finishes. He can find a way to win. And then the one that I was thinking of in that pre-Dan Hooker, Calvin Kattar period was the Sadiq Youssef one, where Arnold Allen like beat up Sadiq Youssef for 2 rounds and then kind of took the third round off. Like, it was... And he rocked Sadiq Youssef a couple times with a high kick. It was a really well-rounded performance from Arnold Allen. So that's kind of been the issue, is that he is this I don't know, it's the Leon Edwards thing, isn't it? It's like you're not this unhyped element of British MMA where it's like Michael Bisping, Darren Till, the trash talkers, that sort of thing that's going to get people going. When in actual fact, the guys that will be champions are Leon Edwards, Arnold Allen's, Mohamed Makayev's. They will be the champs, not, the more showy ones. Even a Tom Aspinall, I think, will become a champion one day. I think that we need to sort of change our perspective on Arnold Allen's career. Yeah, he hasn't been able to get the fights that he would like in the way that Holloway did on the rise, because Holloway is probably a bit more of a marketable draw. He's got his catchphrases, he's got a fan-friendly style.
So
easier to sell.
Quite the political answer you gave us there. So I think what you're saying is there are no big moments that the fans can...
Because how can you have a big moment if you're fighting on undercards of fight nights? Like, you're talking about a big moment where it's just like he's got a co-main event slot and he's facing, I don't know, Shane Burgos or Josh Emmett. He's not been given those guys. Only in the last 2 fights he's been given those guys.
Joe, hold on. In the co-main here, it's also at featherweight. We're going to see a man called Edson Barbosa.
Yeah.
Now, that's a man who's jam-packed with absolute headline moments. That's not because he was always given the best matchups, the primetime spots. He went out there and put on performances that earned him that kind of status.
Because he has a stylistic way of fighting that will probably, appeal to that sort of thing or create those sort of elements. I mean, we're, again, talking about Arnold Allen, who is, a southpaw striker who sort of leans forward on his front foot, kind of almost like in a wrestler stance, and strikes out of a wrestling stance. He's got a really nice left straight that comes at different times, comes at different levels, doesn't have a clear setup of it. He's got a really nice high kick, which, to be honest, it's a bit of a weird one because he seems to fall over a lot after throwing it, but when he lands, he rocks people. He can really rock and damage people. But again, he's faced guys where, it's just not had those chances to sort of like shine. And also with Arnold Allen is that he doesn't put himself into danger. He will, if he rocks someone and he's got him hurt and he feels like he's about to get out of position, he'll move back into position and that will maybe stop the exchange. So he's not going to go flying in there and potentially get himself damaged. He's got very smart lateral movement now. In the past, he was doing the lateral movement almost for the sake of it, whereas now it has an actual point and an emphasis to draw people onto his left hand.
Mm-hmm. And that left hand, as you say, is a huge weapon.
For sure.
I mean, the man hits like a truck.
Yeah.
Let's be honest.
Yeah.
At featherweight, you don't really see power like that.
Remember when he fought Dan Hooker and everyone was like, oh my God, Dan Hooker going down to featherweight, he's going to be a monster, he's going to be massive in there. Arnold Allen wasn't that much smaller than him. Arnold Allen is a big featherweight. Have you ever seen his dad? He's quite a well-known, strong man in the UK. It's, he comes from, a fighting background as well. I think his grandfather was a bare-knuckle boxer. It's a fighting family. So, Allen's, a big, strong dude for this division as well. And I think that could cause problems for Max if it gets into wrestling and clinch exchanges.
Right, yeah. I mean, that's certainly true. So Allen, you're saying, is well-rounded with a strong left hand and solid movement.
Yes, and also the fight that I wanted to cite was the Dustin Poirier-Max Holloway 2 fight. Poirier was landing this right hook over the top of Max's left-hand jab, and he was landing this right hook. And now a lot of people think when you throw the jab, that sort of thing, you can sort of jab back. Poirier instead came with the right hook, and because of where it was coming from, up and sort of around, it was almost a blind shot he was landing on Holloway. And he rocked him in the first round and then loaded. He rocked him in the second round and then loaded. And in the fourth round of that fight, he did the exact same thing. It was a shot that was constantly landing on Holloway, and I would not be surprised to see Arnold Allen land that same shot. Will it be able to do the same amount of damage, though? I mean, Dustin Poirier has got legendary heavy hands. It would be unfair to assume that Arnold Allen has the same tools.
Well, and legendary hooks.
Yes, very hook heavy, and also has very good disguised footwork as well. Whereas Arnold Allen is pretty much strictly southpaw.
Yes, yeah, exactly, and I think that's a key one there. He really is dominating on that left side, but doesn't switch in the same way that Poirier can. I don't know if I'd give him the same credence as a boxer as I would Dustin Poirier. And then you also consider, the weight class, Max going up, fighting a man who then would have cut less in Poirier. I don't know how many parallels will be drawn from that. Of course, that is the fight for me that springs to mind as well, because we saw a very classic Max performance, volume heavy, lead with your chin, eat one, land several. But ultimately, it was the power that stood them apart.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's also something that's kind of surprised me about Max is that, I'm surprised he just hasn't gone to lightweight. I'm surprised he's still at featherweight. He's still fighting down there. Well,
I mean, it's the Poirier fight that drew a line under that. If
no,
Max went on to win that fight, he would have already fought for the belt up there. That broke him for me as a potential lightweight.
I think Poirier's just a bad matchup for him. I think Poirier is just like he's actually almost tailor made to fight Max Holloway, particularly with like the calf kicking game that comes from ATT
You'd prefer
as well.
Holloway against the likes of Makhachev or Sarukian?
Come on, fam. That's not a completely like. I mean, like in a striking
I'm talking
matchup,
about
yeah.
the top tier lightweights that are out there.
If I had Max Holloway versus like, if we take the top 5 right now, what you got? Chandler. I'd take Max. I would take.
You can't be serious that you're going to talk about Chandler as the top 5. Like,
but he is ranked in the top 5, correct?
Okay.
Right.
I would also have Max Holloway in that fight. Yeah.
I think the Gaethje one. I think that's a more stylistic matchup that might favour Max as well. Who else is in that top 5? Oliveira.
Charles Oliveira. Yeah.
I don't know, man. Dariush would be an interesting one. I think Oliveira could be a decent matchup for Max as well. Again, I think Max in a 5-round fight would beat Fiziev.
It's a tantalising prospect. It is a tantalising prospect. And that obviously brings us to where we would go after this fight with a potential win. Not obvious for Max. He is kind of the Robert Whittaker of featherweight right now. He has been beaten and bested. Nobody wants to see that again. Him versus Volkanovski.
No.
So where do you go? Where do you go off a win here for Max Holloway? Do you just keep clearing out the division, the kind of Merab Devashvili guardian spot?
No, I think he should be offered the fights that are just like weight class doesn't matter.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean?
He's kind of in that place for me too, Joe, yeah. Just sell those tickets, have some fun.
Yeah, exactly. And also, like, you have to ask him, like, if you're going to fight once a year, Max, like, what do you want? Like, do you want to be a title challenger, or are you waiting for Volk just to leave and then you can get the title again? Like, you know, or you hope...
That'd be an amazing storyline.
If Yair beats Volkanovski, he has to beat him twice. Like, it's not like...
If Yair beats Volkanovski, please, Joe. We're a serious podcast here. Let's not engage.
Listen,
in
it's
nonsense.
MMA, bro. It's MMA, bro. It's a random-ass sport. Anyone can win at any stage, all right? And that's why we love it. But, you know, Yair is not beating Volkanovski. But I'm just saying, if he did.
Right.
Also...
Allen, of course, if he were to come on and win this fight, can he be denied? I mean, is there any universe you can say
that's more prestigious than beating Josh Emmett for the interim title?
Yeah.
Let's be real. Like,
so wait,
you know, that's a nice title for Yair, but you know.
Yeah. So what? Sorry, Yair. You know, you're you're gonna wait again. We're gonna fast track Arnold Allen.
Yeah, that's what I would do. But no. I'm expecting that would probably be later in the year. That's if Volkanovski stays at featherweight. He seems to keep wanting his Makhachev fight in the UFC. Don't seem that bothered about making it, which I understand.
Not just yet. Not just that. It's out there.
Simmer. You know, easy. Slow cook. Yeah. You know, you want the pork to just pull away. Do you know what I mean? You don't want it. You know, it needs to have time to get to that level.
100% agreed.
Yes.
Now, I just want to make the case a little bit more for Max Holloway here, because I feel like you're not giving the man the respect he deserves.
I'm giving him a huge amount of respect.
Let's talk about how he wins this fight, all right? Yes, we know it could be an issue, the power, and it could shut him down. That's what we're saying. Now, Joe, you highlighted Arnold Allen's fight against Sadiq Youssef. I also want to return to that myself, because Allen, he won the fight. He got those knockdowns. He hit some big shots, and as you say, a bit of a signature of his, he threw the kicks and kind of fell over. It was a little bit comedic at times, but the man was so powerful. There's a lot contained, a lot of kind of fast energy, muscle twitching going on when you watch Arnold Allen. But I just want to pull up a stat there from that fight. All right, round 1, we've got significant strikes, 13 for Youssef, 10 for Arnold Allen, with the one knockdown for Arnold Allen. I think everyone would have felt he won that round, especially with the takedowns. Yeah. Round 2, 18 significant strikes for Sadiq Youssef, 9 for Arnold Allen.
With another knockdown.
Not counted in the official score, but yeah, I remember a heavy shot also there. And then round 3, as you mentioned, Allen took it off apparently, but it was 16 significant strikes to 2. So Youssef outlanded him in every round and doubled him up for significant strikes over the course of the fight. Nearly trebled him for total strikes.
I can see the argument that's forming here, because Max is obviously a very heavy volume striker, also boxing heavy, also headhunter heavy as well, which I do think that has an influence on the judges. I don't think bodywork impresses the judges massively unless there's a clear damage, like the Blachowicz shark bite. Yeah.
Yeah.
You know, that's unless we got that, like, I don't think they favour that necessarily. I think this is also just a part of, like, Arnold Allen's game of a few years ago, because, again, Allen has been fighting, like, once a year. You know, he's been away in the lab, working away. You know, I don't... Max has said...
He's been injured.
He has been injured, for sure. But Max has said it as well. Like, what am I going to learn about this guy who fights once a year? Like, I can't really predict anything. Whereas, obviously, Max has a ton of tape on him. That's why, for Max, I would suggest a long-range kicking game to be implemented at points in the fight. Disrupt Arnold Allen, long kicking to the legs, long kicking to the body. That's what I would do. Disrupt his rhythm, get his hands moving in places that he doesn't want them to go, get him sort of like down pushing, trying to catch kicks, which could then set up the hands from there. You know, you could also fake a sort of like, let's say, a rear leg kick, which you could actually use then to disguise a step in to then jab from there. You could do things like that. That would be my suggestion for a game plan.
I mean, let me tell you what I don't want to see from Max here. I do not want to see some signature Max Holloway elements, and those are standing in the pocket and trading like a wild man when it's totally not necessary. He loves it. He loves it. But against Arnold Allen, I don't fancy him in a gunfight. We've seen Max's chin stand up time after time, but we've seen Allen fold some people. We've seen him blitz some people like Dan Hooker.
Well, and also Cater in that fight. Like, Calvin Cater was rocked really badly in that first round.
Yeah, I'd like to see more of that, Joe.
Also, yeah, Cater is a rounds 2, 3, 4, 5 sort of fighter. Like, you know, he blew his knee out in the second round. It was like, there's not really much you can do if you're Arnold Allen with that. But I thought you won the first round. You can take from that what you can. Right, Tom. Dick on the line. What are you predicting?
Yeah, Max Holloway wins this fight.
Arnold Allen for me.
Comfortable. Just coasts. Puts the work on him. Allen comes out looking like he doesn't know what's happened to him. He's been dapped from every angle. The volume's been put on him. Easy money. Just Holloway, stay away from trading in the pocket.
Which you won't do. Come on.
I think he's got the intelligence to back away from that. Now, ultimately, he was having a hard time, as you mentioned, with Yair Rodriguez. You know, those fast kicks, the power that Rodriguez does carry, and he recognised that and he switched it up. And I think also, you know, he's learned from fights like the Poirier fight. So I've got Holloway just masterclass.
Arnold Allen decision for me. Blood and thunder, back and forth battle. And I expect Arnold Allen also to implement his clinch game to take rounds away from Holloway. Clinching him up against the fence, elbows from there, knees to the body. I expect that's where he'll attack the body from there, is from the clinch position. For Arnold Allen, again though, I'm expecting huge bursts of volume from Holloway, particularly like maybe rounds 3 and 4, if he's down a couple rounds.
2s and 3s, Joe. Likely does it. Rack up the points. Signature
I don't know, man. Like, we're talking about a guy who's been in this game for like over 10 years in the UFC, and he's taken a lot of... Like, that's within that 10-year timeline...
Brother, just keep talking. Just keep talking.
I'm just saying, man.
I'm getting Justin Gaethje falls off against Fiziev vibes.
Listen,
and I love it.
You were about to say the same thing on that pod, and then you bottled not coming on. So, that's what happened. Okay? Right, now let's move on. Tom, there's 2 fights we want to talk about. I think. Should we talk about... Do you want to talk about the co-main quickly? Edson Barbosa versus Billy Q Quarantillo.
Well, it's another gunfight, Joe.
I think this lines up quite well for Barbosa. Like, I think Quarantillo will stay in range. You know, he likes working in that range. And like, the thing with Barbosa is all the way out or all the way in. You have to sort of crowd him and stop that kicking game. But the thing is, I then go back to that Shane Burgos fight where Barbosa knocked him out with the hands. With that terrifying knockout, with that delayed knockout. But having watched that Burgos Quarantillo fight a couple times now, Quarantillo, he just, I don't know, it's within that range of like, don't stay in there. And he does just stay in that point. I think he needs to go all the way in, clinch fight, you know, the Yoel Romero dirty boxing. I'm doing the arm movement. You can see, you know what I'm doing, listeners. You know, I think this could line up quite nicely for Barbosa. Tell me if I'm wrong, Tom.
I think you might be wrong, Joe.
Just that washed?
I really think we're turning the corner here. Look, I don't want to pull a Joe Greenwood and predict a spectacular fall off of Barbosa, but I don't think it would be that spectacular because we've seen him slowing a little bit.
Yeah.
A little bit, all right? Last 2 times out against Bryce Mitchell and Giga Chikadze. Yeah. Not great looks for Barbosa. 37 years old now, Joe.
Quarantillo's 34, by the way. He's not that far off of him in age. Just doesn't have the miles. Doesn't have the miles as well.
And different styles. It's not just the explosion. We've seen Barbosa wilt as the rounds goes on, especially with of course, if anyone implements any kind of pressure wrestling, then that is kryptonite to Barbosa. I don't think that's that necessary. I think you just tie him up for a little bit, let him punch himself out, and could be quite comfortable for Quarantillo. So you might be wrong, Joe.
Fair enough. No, I think Quarantillo will win. I just think that there's elements to his game that might get him in danger against Barbosa.
5 years ago, Joe, I wouldn't be saying this. This is blasphemy, what I'm saying right now.
Yes.
37 years old. I think that's some hard yards at featherweight.
In the prelims, we love this fight. Brandon Royval versus Mateus Nicolau. There was an interesting interview with Royval where someone was talking about, asking him about, sort of like moving on the outside and whatnot. And Royval said, "Why would I do that? I'm there to have a fight. Let's get into it." He says, "I don't like that sort of thing." Well, Mateus Nicolau...
That sort of nonsense.
No, I don't want any of that guff, son, right? Well, Mateus Nicolau will not engage in that sort of guff and will also meet him head-on in the centre of this cage. I think Nicolau, though, he's got the sort of grappling advantage that I think will cause Royval a lot of problems. But Royval, though, he's thrown up some sneaky subs. Some sneaky subs there. He's thrown up some interesting exchanges. What was that? Was it the fight against... Kai Kara France that I'm thinking of, where he got that guillotine choking on Kara France. Yeah, man. I think Royval, he's got quite long limbs for flyweight as well, so he can sneak things in from there. But I think Nicolau, he's a bit of a bull. He's a bit of a bull, and he's on a bit of a streak here. And I think, having finished Matt Schnell in his last fight, and he did so brutally with the vintage punch, knockdown, ground and pound finish. And Royval liking to sit in that pocket exchange, Nicolau could get another highlight finish here. If Royval moving forward into Nicolau, that smells a bit of danger to me. But an exciting fight regardless.
It certainly is. Can't understand he could possibly put this on the prelims. Doesn't make any sense to me.
This would be co-main event for me.
Yeah, for me, it's there is one other fight I want to mention after this, but it's certainly one of the more intriguing matchups, and it means it carries weight at flyweight, Joe, and flyweight has been growing. Let it flourish, UFC. Get them on the main card.
Absolutely.
But yeah, good fight. Good fight. Tune in for this one.
What's the other fight you want to mention?
I think we have to talk about your man Chris Gutierrez, ranked 13 now at bantamweight. All right, he's coming off a win over Frankie Edgar. It's a bit of a signature path these last few years for fighters to make their names off of him. I'm not really comfortable with that myself, but nonetheless, he did what he was supposed to do, dispatched Edgar, and now he finds himself against another old man of the sport, but one who's perhaps not quite so washed. A test in Pedro Munoz, ranked 9 at bantamweight. Pedro
Munoz was actually quite an intelligent fighter. I loved his performance against Sean O'Malley and just neutralising him. He did the thing that you're supposed to do, which is you're supposed to switch stances with him, and meaning that he couldn't get any kicks off. He's a difficult one to beat, Munoz. And he has that loss to Frankie Edgar, which I actually thought he won that fight. And he's got a couple close decision losses. He had the one against Dominic Cruz that was close, but Aldo sort of dispatched him quite easily. But Chris Gutierrez here, he's got a really heavy leg kicking game, as does Pedro Munoz. And Pedro Munoz is pretty good at checking leg kicks. That's the interesting battle there for me. Also, is Gutierrez going to invite Munoz in and intercept like he did against Frankie Edgar with that sort of knee up the middle? Are we going to see that again? Also, uppercuts coming up the middle from Gutierrez. That is how he set up that knee against Frankie Edgar. I just don't think Munoz is as immobile as Edgar is. I think he's got better lateral movement. However, I can't look past the younger man here, Tom. It's hard for me not to pick Chris Gutierrez, who I think is really good And it shows how good bantamweight is that this guy's ranked number 13. Can you imagine, like, number 13 at, like, heavyweight or light heavyweight or middleweight would just not be comparable to this?
No, certainly right, Joe. I'm really intrigued to see. I don't have strong feelings on this, but as you mentioned with Pedro Munoz, you shouldn't forget the number one contender at bantamweight. He was in trouble in that fight. Sean O'Malley could have shipped to a loss there. Now, people want to brush past it now. Ultimately, the fight was stopped. Couldn't go on, so there was no decision. But that was a cop out for O'Malley because I think he was going down there, Joe.
Yeah. I had Munoz winning that first round, and the second round was going the same way. O'Malley was getting frustrated, and if Munoz won that second round, I don't think O'Malley would have got him out there, and you could have had a very sneaky decision win for Munoz, and then
Well, getting him out of there is something that you just don't do with Pedro Munoz. He is, not to use the old cliches, but he's as tough as they come, Joe.
He's as tough as a $2 steak, Pedro Munoz. There's some other stuff on this card, but we'll talk about that on Sunday or Monday when we come back. We'll talk about the rest of this card. Lando Venata's back. We like a bit of Lando Venata, don't we, Tom? And a bit of a weird one here. Tanner Boser going down to light heavyweight from heavyweight. He was one of the quicker heavyweights, which doesn't really mean much. I don't know if that's going to translate down at light heavy, particularly against your boy Ion Cutelaba. But we'll be back to talk about that. Tom, the news is that there's lots of fights. Can I talk to you about these fights?
I'm ready for it, Joe.
Here we go. First of all, there's a fight happening tonight, April 14th. Shane Burgos is back, facing Olivier Mercier. Remember him in the UFC? PFL lightweight champion. That's his debut in the PFL. I'm hoping Burgos can win this and go further into the PFL tournament. We love Shane Burgos.
Yeah, I think you're not alone in that. The big wigs over in the PFL will be hoping for much the same. Bit of a signature signing, Burgos, just 32 now.
Yes.
So something of a coup to scoop him away from the UFC. Always brought the heat. We're both sad to see him go, so it would be a bit disappointing for him and also the Chiefs over at PFL if he were to succumb to Aubin Mercier. Didn't have quite the same stellar UFC run. No shame in that though. Should we talk about that fight when we're next on? Actually, we'll talk about the Burgos fight. Right. In the UFC, let me pick this one. You know what? Actually, we'll talk about it. We just talked about it briefly. Amanda Nunes is headlining UFC 289 in Canada against Juliana Pena number 3. Now, people have been dumping on this fight, and rightfully so, for it being the main event. But Tom, I'm going to offer this to you. The first fight offered a massive upset, and it was a sloppy brawl. And the second fight was an absolutely bloody battle that Nunes dominated in the end. Like, let's be honest here. If you want blood and guts, if you want to get a finish, this is kind of the fight you want, no? Like, this isn't that bad if you want that sort of entertainment. But if you want refined MMA, Amanda Nunes having to switch stances to run away from a dipping jab, I mean, it's probably not what you're going to get, is it? Joe, if you want blood and guts, Ion Cutelaba, he's here, he's ready. All right, we can do him versus Ankalaev 3 in Canada. I'm sure they'd love it. All right?
Yeah.
This is ridiculous. Now, I don't want to dump too hard on Nunes, and I'm not going to.
Right.
What I'm saying is, how does Pena have a title shot? How is that not making a total mockery of the sport? It wasn't close the last fight. The first one was a total shock and upset, and then the default continued.
Rematch.
It resumed.
Yeah.
The freak upset was ironed out. Nunes moves on. Pena fights 3 or 4 more times. Gets her head down. But that's not what's happened. She's straight back in after that loss for another fight. How can you tell me this is a legitimate decision when you're going to make this fight for a third time?
Do the UFC think that Pena's like a sneaky, weird draw with
Yes.
Do you reckon that's what it is?
Yes.
But Aldana's Mexican. Why don't you get her in there? You could sell the fourth Mexican champion.
Joe.
The 4 pillars of Mexican MMA.
After our last pod,
Yeah.
we were sharing some post pod recollections, and we did a little game. You remember this one, Joe?
Yes, I remember.
pulled up the official UFC rankings for women's bantamweight, and I asked you to name as many fighters as you could. Now,
How many did I get out of 15?
You just about got to one hand. Maybe you got to a second hand.
I got to 7.
Which was truly admirable, and I think puts you in the pound for pound greatest fans of women's bantamweight. Because I don't know any of these. All right?
I'm the Alexander Volkanovski of women's bantamweight fans.
That's right.
Okay, great.
That's right. And Pena is ultimately known. She's known for that win and nothing else. But she has that, and that's a lot more than the other ladies. So, yeah, what can we say about this division, Joe? It's poor.
Let's talk about men's flyweight. Brandon Moreno has his next title fight set, International Fight Week. Alexander Pantoja, they faced each other twice before. Pantoja's beaten him twice. I mean, here's Alex Pereira of sorts. I mean, this is banger central. Like, I am... Out of all the fights that I'm going to mention, I think that's the one I'm most excited for.
Yeah, rematch, long time coming. Pantoja's been there. He's been calling for it. He's done everything he's had to do. He's not really getting the push from the UFC, but he deserves it because he has quite the reel. Joe, you take the time to sit down and watch Pantoja, you're guaranteed some violence.
What's the one where he just like sat in the pocket with your man and just like traded in like inside a round? He got like the guillotine finish. I'll have to bring it up, but yeah, Pantoja, man, he's all action all the time. You know, Moreno is a superb, well-rounded fighter. It was actually the Alex Perez fight. It was an Alex Perez fight. Or inside of like 90 seconds, they were just trading back and forth, craziness. Pantoja takes the back and gets the rear naked choke. Pantoja is a beast. We'll break down that fight in greater detail closer to the time. But listeners, I just want you to get excited. That is a superb fight, and I cannot wait for it. Also, speaking of potential superb fights, this hasn't been confirmed yet. Bryce Mitchell was supposed to face Jonathan Pearce at the UFC pay-per-view in a few weeks. Well, he's pulled out Pearce and offering up his skills to face Bryce Mitchell. Movsar Evloev has said, I want the fight. If I'm Bryce Mitchell, thank you, but no thank you.
Yeah, that's a rough one. After fighting Topuria to then get Evloev. These are the two names that all of us have been looking at coming through the division. And if Bryce Mitchell happens to be on the tracks for the second train coming through, that's pretty unlucky for him. Now, given the psychological state that he was put into by that loss to Topuria, I really think this would be a bad look for him.
I don't think Mitchell could take Evloev down. I don't think he could do it.
I think Bryce Mitchell has a place in our sport, Joe, and I don't think he should fight Evloev in this fight.
Not yet. He shouldn't fight. I mean, if he fought Topuria and Evloev back to back, I'd honestly give him a round of applause because no one else would be willing to do that. Whoever fights Topuria is just like, oh, you're facing Evloev next. No, I'm not. But to say yes to both of those guys, like that's insane.
It's not official yet.
Not official yet, no. Evloev has said that he is willing to do it, and Mitchell is in need of an opponent. I just always go back to that Topuria-Mitchell fight where Topuria just pancaked him, just put his hand to his chest and just pushed him down to the mat. Man, poor Bryce Mitchell. But yeah, we saw the limits of Mitchell there, and I don't know if we really need to see it again against Evloev. Speaking of Topuria, seems like he's finally got his fight, and it's going to be Josh Emmett. And again, I'm not feeling it for Mr. Emmett.
Brutal sport, isn't it, Joe?
It's just the way it is. It really
the old make way for the young.
That's how it should be. That's how it should be. If you're going to go out, like, ideally you want to go out in, well, you want to win, but if you're going to lose, you want to do it with some honour, and you want to do it against a guy who's going to become champion, don't you? Like, if you go out and you're like, well, that guy went on to become the champion, and I had a great fight with him. There's no dishonour in that, is there?
Now, hold on. Are you saying that this was the planning from Frankie Edgar's coach for the last stage of his career? If I go out and get smashed by all these fellas, one of them will eventually win the belt, and that.
No. No, I mean, Frankie's head had been so scrambled by that point. I don't even know if he thought he was playing tennis or not. I mean, it was. You know, I don't know if that was his game plan. But again, if you are going to lose to guys, I mean, losing to Topuria is not the worst thing in the world, is it? Like. You know, and Josh Emmett will lose to him. You know, Topuria's got such an arrogance to him that I love. Like, I just love watching just like how arrogant he is. I mean, he's well justified. don't you think?
Yeah, certainly from what we've seen so far.
Right. Let's talk about... We could talk about Bo Nickel versus Treshawn Gore, but that's just Bo Nickel winning. Leon Edwards says he won't fight in July against Colby Covington, but he calls for the fight in Abu Dhabi in October. So there was a potential UFC pay-per-view in London again in July, which I'm guessing will not be a pay-per-view anymore. Tom Aspinall says he's back and ready in training, so you could do an Aspinall main event again. But I'm going to talk about this, Tom. Jake Paul versus Nate Diaz in boxing has been set for August in Texas. Now, I don't care about the fight, right? But what I am finding interesting now is that this is going to be on DAZN, and it's going to be a DAZN pay-per-view. The first few Jake Paul boxing fights were on Showtime. The last one was on ESPN. And now he's on DAZN, and I think this is showing that perhaps there is a slowing lack of interest. Like there's starting to become a lack of interest in this. And what I find interesting is that Nate Diaz, apparently, he just wants to do one boxing match and then go back to the UFC. And can I just say this, Tom? I don't think the UFC will sign him again unless it's just for that Conor fight.
And I also don't think he wants to fight in the UFC again, Joe. I think it's just the Nate Diaz show. It's part of the game. How long was Nick Diaz teasing a return? And we saw the way he came back. So, yeah, I don't see that happening. I mean, you speak to a kind of fading interest in the change of promoter, or the broadcaster. That's what happens when you lose to Tommy Fury.
Yeah.
The first boxer who's been trained and he boxes you and you can no answer.
Got no response. Yeah.
I mean that definitely slows the hype. Now we said that this fight probably wouldn't happen, that this fight was dead in the water after that loss to Fury, and that's because, well, ultimately it isn't as big a draw as it would have been. You go and beat Tommy Fury, you have your antics with Nate Diaz, and you're going to keep a strong fan base on board. They start to wonder, the sky is the limit. Yeah, no real interest in the fight, and very little interest in how these careers develop, unfortunately. But I was getting teased. I was getting hooked in a little bit. This whole potential coming into the PFL. I know all the money behind him. Presumably the athleticism to become a fighter. It's intriguing until you lose to Tommy Fury.
Yeah. That's a real good full stop to end this podcast on. Listeners, thank you so much for joining us. We will be back on Sunday or Monday to break down the Fight Night card, which is headlined by Max Holloway versus Arnold Allen. You can tell that me and Tom were hyped for that fight for the fact that we did 20 minutes on it, but listen, there'll be some good stuff coming off that. You can contact us at holdonbrother69@gmail.com. Like, subscribe, spread the words around. Tom, thank you so much for joining me.
Yeah, thanks, Joe. I'm just going to take some notes on your comments about Max Holloway, ready for the review pod.
And listeners, thank you so much for joining us. And God bless and have a lovely weekend.
Bye, everybody.
Bye-bye.